Hey out there, here we are again with another episode of Don't Talk Politics. I'm your host, Tahuti Kambui. I'll be joined shortly with my co-host, Sundiata. And today's topic is the politics of policing blacks. We felt it necessary to continue in this discussion and along these lines to make sure that we really get across the point of the historical repression that occurs and that seems to be in denial by our own people as well as others. And I feel that we needed to really focus in and give some attention to the underlying reasons for that. There are underlying reasons, there are psychological reasons, and there are things that are learned concerning our people, stereotypes that contribute to the atmosphere which we find ourselves in, where we're on the other end of a barrel of a gun, regardless of if we have one or not, which is crazy odds for one, and a no-win situation. We have civilians feeling they can pull guns on us. We have definitely law enforcement feeling that they should be pulling guns on us in very normal situations, situations that are not escalated. Yet we find ourselves time and time again attending funerals, scraping together funds to bury loved ones, marching and bringing attention and doing all of these things that seem to be not having a true impact on the killing of our people. So let's look at this. Historically, we'll start with the beginning of policing in this country, which basically came out of the slave catching theater, which allowed for brutality as part and parcel of the policing methods. So you can't police or treat a person humanely who you consider an animal. And it was necessary to reduce our people as subhuman in order to justify the enslavement of our ancestors. And in doing such, it also justified the ill treatment. And in some cases, they even treated animals better than they treated their fellow human beings, our ancestors. And so we need to get into the mentality behind that. Why was that necessary? Why was it necessary to devalue us as a human being? And the answer is because it was profitable. You see, slavery, when people always ask us, well, why are you always talking about slavery? Well, you have to know the foundations of what it gave this country. It gave this country, first of all, its economic base. That's the North and the South. So don't talk about the South and thinking you're just talking about the southern states. No, the whole of the Union was founded on that economy. It also, like I said, slavery gave birth to capitalism. And out of that, they were able to parlay the economic gains to build massive amount of wealth, and then with that wealth, acquire more means to oppress. It gave birth to the untold story of U.S. imperialism. It also gave the birth to the different systems. Systems are necessary or institutions rather are necessary to solidify a hold. So when a person has gain, when you have a gain on profits and the greed sets in, then you have a system that's backing that up. The institutions back that up. So our institutions back up the repression or oppression. And how do you enforce that? You have the police. So let's bring that epoch or that story to the current stage, because you have to understand why policing was necessary to control the behavior blacks in particular and people of color. That's necessary. It's necessary because you want to maintain a profit level, you want to maintain control, and you want to maintain power. And so policing is the institution's enforcement, the right hand or the strength in order to enforce the policies, the politics, the theories, the racist stereotypes. All of that is enforced by these police, and the police are judge, jury, and executioner on the street, on the site, and it's unquestionable the discrimination that is taking place. Now, as you all can see, we were just joined by my co-host, Sundiata Madison. We're encouraging you guys to please click subscribe if you haven't on the We Are LA site, and also to call in at area code 424-234-8670. We welcome your comments on this very important topic. Sundiata, you have something you want to just introduce on the topic of policing and brutalizing of the black community?
Yeah, just follow up on what you were saying about, how even the police know that they're the military arm for the 1%, and because they always threaten to quit or walk off the job, and they're sending a direct message to the ruling elite that you need us in this capacity to keep this group of people away from you, since you're running them and causing them to be unemployed, and you're locking them up and you're using them for your wealth. We are that military arm for you inside of the United States. So yeah, that's a good point.
Right, and they also, they are the quote unquote. I've heard the term keepers of the zoo, things of that nature when they're describing our neighborhoods, and they're the buffer to make sure that we don't go out of our geographical designation.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one of the protests in Beverly Hills by Rodeo Drive, they actually had the SWAT team protecting the Hilton Hotel there where Beverly Hills Cop was filmed. It was smart of the protesters to take it over to the other side of town for that protest. But they brought out the heavyweights, because the closer and closer they got to the 1%, the more and more serious the law enforcement officers became.
And it's interesting because we said the same thing back when 92 when the Rodney King uprising was taking place, how they made sure that you didn't venture past a certain point where they had heavy artillery, heavy presence and deterrence to make sure that didn't happen. So let's talk about this this policing, the mentality of policing. Like I said, the dehumanizing of us, which is necessary to justify the brutality of us. Because if you see that person as a human being, how can you mutilate? How can you beat? Right. How can you savagely treat? How could you at any point devalue the life where you would snuff it out in the blink of an eye without even a second thought? So what are some of these stereotypes that we have been faced with? One is that we are some kind of animalistic savage that needs this paternal guidance, or we would revert to just killing and all of these things. These stereotypes, calling us cannibals and all this other crazy stuff. Like we've said in previous shows, we gave birth to civilization. We gave birth to science, to medicine, to even governance, laws, and arts, and all of these people. High character areas. You come back to Africa every single time, yet they had to subject us to that type of mental torture. So this is a critical point, because I see us becoming desensitized, and our leadership is trying to tell our youth to become desensitized to the killing of black people, and I think it's sort of like they're becoming numb, to these tragedy. If these things happen in any other country, so especially a so-called industrialized nation, it would wreak horror. It would be an outrage. In fact, there would be not hundreds of thousands and millions and millions and millions in the streets saying this has to end. But when it becomes down to a black life, it's so devalued by this society. It's historically reinforced by the educational system and by all these other propaganda stereotype systems.
Entertainment.
Entertainment as
Music,
well.
yeah.
And that they keep us into this mindset,
Yeah.
where we're accepting.
Yeah.
We'll say in the back of our mind, well, they must have did something.
Exactly, yeah. It goes back to when first of all, it goes back to when you start talking about shaping the black image. It started off when Africa, of course, we ruled over Spain for 800 years, but that European coming out of that experience decided to reshape the image of the black person so they can wreak revenge upon us. And one of that thing was that they could no longer see us as a shaper of civilizations. They had to shape us or see us as uncivilized. And so you look at, let's rush up to the turn of the century when Birth of a Nation came out, and even though we passed many laws which are still in the books today in the South during Reconstruction, they put in their movies that we were lazy and eating watermelon and playing and shucking and jiving. They pushed that image so heavily, and I have to admit that you look at the 60s and the 70s, they were able to masterfully take entertainment and target the youth, because like you always say, it's the youth that won the civil rights struggle.
Yes,
it was the youth that really were out there fighting. So the United States government has warred upon the image of the youth, even to the youth themselves, to the point where now young boys embrace the image of a thug. They embrace the image of a gangster, outlaw, or street, or hood. Matter of fact, you got hood passes. See, this kind of language was not around in 50s and 60s when these young men were risking their lives for people they did not know and facing the most brutal regime in the world as young people.
Right.
They were able to successfully, through music, one hand they had the music that made you be a thug, and then they had the drugs coming in from South America, and then they had the prisons waiting for you.
And the film, and the imagery. And so,
the imagery.
Because we talk about it all the time, and especially that's why we say the value of history is so important. As you said, we dominated as the Moors at 800 years and throughout Europe, and then before that, Rome was hell bent on defeating Carthage with Hannibal, an African,
exactly,
who dominated the masterful general in his mind. And then you can go back further to the ancient Kemites, or Egypt as the current people call it. You had many a general, Ramses. You had Taharka, who always reaped havoc.
Right.
On their unjust invaders. And then the Greeks themselves looked at us as gods. They had us as gods in all of their sculptures.
Exactly.
And so this is well established. You had the ancient empires of West Africa, of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, and Benin, and all of these great structures.
The Dogon.
You go to the Yoruba. You can go through all of these great civilizations, all these great people, yet is foreign to that black child. So you've seen that black child, he doesn't see that great general. He don't hear the great story of his great ancestors, and how they defeated these invaders, and how they were a people of high esteem and stature.
Well, I think you shared with me before document coming out of England. I think it was 16th century, when there was a parliamentary individual who said the way we have to, these people are so enlightened and so beautiful and blessed, the way to beat them, we have to take their culture from them.
That's it.
We have to break them by breaking their culture. And this is so hard because when you talk to the modern day so-called African, no matter where he is in the world, the one thing he hates is his African self. And so, but the one thing they do not realize is that if you re-embrace those values which you gave to the world, you will be back on top, So, it's very interesting that 60s, 70s to now, you see this war on black people. You see the explosion of prisons during the 80s and 90s with the Reagan era and the crack that came into, which we never really fully really got any restitution for in terms of how they dumped cracking our neighborhoods with Freeway Ricky Ross and so forth.
Well, that's why it's an international question, and there's no question about it. We know we're talking domestic. We know we're talking about, everybody's into this election and coming up, and they want to talk about Trump, and they want to talk about Biden, and they want to talk about the issues that never will be addressed. But they talk about them during these times because it's basically a pattern.
The season,
and the deception that takes place year in, year out, is just mind blowing. How we can sit and not get results in the midst of blood running in the street, in the midst of a
child being shot,
exactly.
by a bullet.
Exactly. A child the other day at the protest, which we'll get into, being shot with rubber bullet and pepper spray, about a 9-year-old girl, and see people just not be affected by it because of the desensitizing of our culture. This is a violent culture,
right?
And it tries to amend whatever disagreement or whatever dissension takes place with violence.
Right.
And there's no question about that. So our question is the image of strength, why is that frowned upon by our leadership? Why do they only teach sort of like a defeatist mindset, like the war is already won by the other side, and you have nothing else to do but survive if you can,
individually.
And it's interesting because one of our great psychologists that passed the right way on August 12th, Dr. Williams, he was one who exposed the biases and standardized tests. He's the one that came up with the term Ebonics, which is ebony and phonics combined, which means Ebonics, that went through all the ridicule that it will have because white supremacy is not going to acknowledge the things that affect black people because they are at the root of it. When they talk about, so anyway, he came up with this. He said, he was told a story, an African proverb story, and it goes like this: the gazelle and the lion. The gazelle and the lion both wake up, and the gazelle knows that it has to run in order to survive. It has to outrun that lion. And then the lion also wakes up and says, in order for me to survive, I have to outrun that gazelle. So they both have the mindset that they have to outrun the opposite or the opponent in order to survive. See, our problem is that we've always been the gazelle, never the lion. And you have to be the lion also, because the lion has to catch that to survive as well.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what our grandparents used to say, you got to be twice as good.
Yes.
And that's why also we don't look at, even when we retell stories such as Black Wall Street or Tulsa, which was really Little Africa, because how they retell the story shapes you into a defeatist mindset. They rarely ever tell you that there was an African blood brotherhood with guns fighting back that held them to a standstill, and there was a bomb up above that was dropped upon them. But, they rarely ever tell you stories about the African blood brotherhood protecting people like Marcus Garvey, even when he went to the South and was able to check the Klan and allowed him to speak. These are stories in which we won. And there's a lot of stories there's a guy, Robert Williams, right?
Yeah, Robert Williams.
Robert Negroes with Guns.
That's right.
And in that book, it tells you examples of how there were actually blacks who did win certain battles with white dominant society in the
Deacons
South.
of Defense.
The Deacons of Defense. And because one reporter went to Dr. Martin Luther King's house after it was bombed. He said he sat down in a chair. There was more guns under the chair than he ever saw in his life. He was setting all these guns, and people were with guns all around protecting Martin Luther King. They said he's nonviolent, but we not,
Right.
So that's the thing.
But see, they mistake that was a political that was a strategy and a tool used for that. Yeah. But it was no way a protection for people. And that's the problem. Right. They're presenting it to our youth as a protection, and it's not a protection at all. No. It is just simply a strategy that was used in order to gain attention. What attention is here. Yeah. So you don't need that strategy anymore. The attention is here.
Right.
So
Right.
You have to, all animals, all things in nature have a method of protecting themselves. Even a flower would fold up to try to protect itself.
Or have thorns.
Or have thorns, or exactly like a cactus or a rose bush.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't pick it.
Yeah.
So everything protects itself. So to say that we can't protect ourselves is to really license us to be a permanent underclass or a permanent slave or a permanent second-class citizen. So if you're going to accept that status yourself, don't be such a coward as to project that to the future generation. That's all we're saying. Because sometimes, like Dr. King used to say, a man can't ride your back unless it's bent.
Right.
So some people gonna stand up.
Right.
Some people gonna stand erect.
Right.
And see, a man can't jump on your back when you're standing up erect. So that's the difference of the generation that we're looking at today, and I applaud them for that.
Yeah. And then, as we condition our boys to be men, when we're not just talking about guns, we're also talking about the mentality that you have someone you have to outrun, you have to outpace, you have to outmaneuver, you have to outthink. This is something that we don't give our children. We teach them that, well, one day race won't matter. Well, we don't want to be like them. And we have all these talks that's not going to have you win. Every group that comes here practice group economics, group thinking, and has things that they want to accomplish. We used to be that way, but since we've turned our children over to the dominant society, we're no longer that way. I'm gonna mention something on policing, because we talked about policing, and people don't realize that we are money makers for the government. And having us seen as criminals and even behave as criminals because of the conditioning in the music, it creates a mass amount of wealth for people. People are becoming extremely wealthy just on policing. Let's look at New York, for instance. New York's, nationwide, they spend $150 billion just in policing. New York spends $6 billion a year in policing. And if New York was considered an army, it would be the 7th largest army in the world. There was one time after Eric Gardner was murdered. Yeah. The police union said, "Oh, you know what? Well, we're not going to do our job." He encouraged them not to make that many arrests, and they did. They said arrests went down 27%. But guess what? Violent crime went
did
down
also
20%.
Crime did also.
So we have to realize we do not need them at the capacity that they are in.
That's just a fear that's been instilled in society, and that goes back to what we were saying about the foundations, which are the stereotypes, which says that you need this because there's this massive amount of criminals, black criminals out here that's waiting to savage you. Going back to the birth of a nation, that was endorsed by the President Woodrow Wilson, who himself was as a child witnessed Jefferson Davis arrest and transportation across the southern states, and he felt all sad behind that.
Wow.
So he backed the Klan, and the Klan was endorsed and involved in many of the FBI stings, quote unquote, during the 60s, during the civil rights movement, when they killed those workers, Cheney, Swarner, and Goodman. So we have a lot of issues with who needs to police our community.
That's right.
And we maintain that we need to police our own community. Black men, black fathers, black preachers, black coaches, we are capable of policing our community.
And I would say so far as we need to imprison our prisoners. If we feel there's somebody in our community that we feel needs to be taken off the street for a second, we should be in charge of rehabbing them.
That's right.
And we need to change the clause that says that slavery is not accepted anywhere but in prison. There's no reason at all that slavery should be accepted at all.
Because it's inhumane.
It is, and it's contrary. Why would you have slavery still in the Constitution? If a person commits a crime,
because slave owners wrote it. That's
exactly.
Why.
But as a people, we need to look at it and go, this needs to be taken out.
That can't be there.
This can't be there because you're saying that slavery still exists to this day. And matter of fact, as we always say, there are more prisoners now than there were Africans enslaved in slavery. So in other words, we have more slaves now.
Especially, yes.
We have more slaves now than we did, and especially black men. So these kind of things that we live with, but we accept and we never think a challenge.
And let's not eliminate the pipeline that exists for that. That starts with when they're like we read the other day. Remember, I sent the article.
Yeah.
A young boy during this COVID,
Mm.
12-year-old boy is at home in his class, and he moves his. It's in Florida, I believe. Yeah, Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He moves his
Toy gun.
Mm-hmm. from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the teacher alerts the administrator who they recorded, which you're not supposed to be doing, recording it. They record it, then they try to get out of that some other kind of way. But anyway, long story short, they send the police to this man's house. This woman was astute enough to call her husband to come back to the house. She said, wait a minute, they're talking about suspending. And they suspended this boy at his own house for moving a toy gun across the screen. He never pointed it. He never played with it. He just saw it as a distraction. He has ADHD, and he saw it, and he's a little boy. But he could, it was
clearly a toy gun, though.
Yeah, it was.
That was
clearly
another thing. It was green on the top with the orange
right.
that designates that, and the teacher
didn't
acknowledged that she knew it was a toy gun.
She said it, but it didn't matter.
What's criminal about it is how police are murdering us right now.
Wholesale.
She actually almost gave this boy a death sentence for moving from one thing to another
by sending the police to his house.
And this is the person that we have in front of this child to educate. How many other black boys and girls has she educated in the past? And we don't take this serious enough. And
this is like what we call it, the educational gas chamber. So when you see this same behavior, these same children are disciplined disproportionately.
Yes, they are.
These same children are suspended disproportionately.
Yes, they are.
These same children are labeled and criminalized disproportionately. And then by miseducating them, suspending them from school, and not providing them with the same nourishment or nurturing that they would provide any other student, they label them and put them in this category and condemn them. And then what is left as an alternative are the streets, right? Or a system that is already attacking them, and they choose the streets more times than not,
right? Because
of that system.
Well, the problem I have,
and it feeds each other. The
problem I have with it is that we actually are buying into it.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
see too many black adults who say, "Well, there is something wrong with our children. It is some," and that goes to an ignorant person who does not know history. Because if you knew history, like Earl Grant used to always say, in New York, there was a junior high school class, middle-aged, free black children in the 1850s,
That's right.
before the end of slavery, were outscoring white children in New York. And not only that, but if you go to one of the first high schools in the country for black people at Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C., had higher test scores, and they had people with PhD because they couldn't get a job anywhere else working in those schools. And those children were exceptional. They had gone on to become doctors, gone on to become politicians, and so forth. Coming from this school, it was extreme success. As a matter of fact, like you always say, we could look back at the integration movement after Brown versus Board of Education, and we've actually been going downward with our educational progress in terms of us as a whole. We have to, like you said, relook at Brown versus Board of Education. If you want to go into integration, you can. But we should be able to control the schools in our area because it comes down to jobs, it comes down to funding, it comes down to control of the mindset of our children. And if our children are going to fail, let them fail on our dime. Don't let them fail on somebody else's dime, and then you turn around and give us another game called charter schools and vouchers.
Okay, so when we're looking at most of the
we got a
propaganda, we're going to go ahead and take this phone call. Caller, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I live in Baltimore. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
My son was suspended for circling the word bomb on a crossword puzzle, and they suspended him. He's Caucasian. I just want you to know that he actually circled the word mob. It wasn't bomb.
Mm-hmm.
He has autism. Bomb would be B-O-M-B, and he circled the word M-O-B. They still suspended him, and he's Caucasian. I just want you to know, I don't think that's a race thing so much as a post-9/11 hysteria thing, and I do think that she could have gotten that boy killed, and that was the fault of the teacher, and I hope they sue the education system there in their county for doing that to that young boy. And I'll take any comments off the air. Thank you.
appreciate
Love
that.
you guys. Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate that, yeah.
Thank you.
Now-
No. I agree. It may not be specifically a race issue in terms of her sending the police itself, but I think the perception of him being dangerous is indeed race, and I think that the response by the authorities was indeed race. Now there are instances that I agree they overreact on a bunch of things in education. You know, it's a whole lot of a lack of just common sense now. You know, it's a whole lot of fear-based miseducation that's occurring.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fuel behind most of these really crazy acts by these teachers.
The thing about the situation, because we know now we're racially charged, because we know now that black children are already traumatized because they feel that they are being targeted by race, and we have the stats that show that they are, by the way, but just the fact that she called the police to a black child so the black child will see a police at the door is traumatizing. Now, that's not to say there's some horrible stories I've heard of policeman treatment of white people.
Yes.
That's not to say there's not. I believe Kwame Ture used to say that white crime on white is he would call it exploitation. White crime on black is colonialism. In other words, we're not here to say that whites are treating whites fair all the time. No. But we are here to say that the treatment of white on black fits a certain type of mentality. It keeps us in a certain historical place. And so, so this is what we're saying. But yeah, there are many stories of white people being abused upon in terms of in this society.
Absolutely.
Where we're not saying that they never shoot white people the same
Or mistreat them. Because like we said, these are the wealthy elite that we're speaking about that is in control of this, and the mechanisms are the tentacles of the whole era or society or grip of that. It doesn't include your average white person.
Right.
And that's one of the myths that that has been propagated in terms of racial animosity, is that these elite ruling class have the interests of all whites, which they do not. And that's clear. And our other point is that we have a unique time, like Sundiata just said, it's racially charged. And in a racially charged situation where they're trying to provoke conflict, they're trying to provoke some sort of violence, I say, between people of color and whites. But the people that's provoking it and controlling it are well above the fray.
Right.
And that's what we have to identify. So when we're talking about policing, we're going to have to identify what type of policing needs to be in our community.
Also, I think you shared with me the shocking statistic, and it said not only is a black child successful if they come across one or two black educators in their career, but also all children actually benefit from a black educator coming across a black. And I think that comes to the fact that we have that empathy and being in the position that we are. Also, it's interesting to note that Fred Hampton, who was murdered in his sleep, one of the crimes he committed that they felt was reaching out to poor whites in the Appalachian Mountains. We have been, I think we've always extended
without question
our hand and tried to explain to whites that, look, this 1%, even that, and this is what we're doing right now, because we know that Trump does not care about his base. Trump does not invite his base to his country club. Trump is laughing at his base. And that's why he laughed at those soldiers and said, these are idiots and fools. They're losers, because he sees the world as winners and losers. And what he thinks is if you're white, you have a chance to be a winner. But if you're black, you never have a chance to be a winner. So these are the things that we are constantly trying to show whites who are economically hurt by this system, saying that, yeah, it's killing us, but it's hurting you. And you should be joining with us. But sad to say, race always trumps that common sense. Right. That's why he pulls so many.
Because
whites.
In a downtrodden situation, you need someone to feel better than. And they show us as the people that you're going to feel better than. Regardless if there's merit in it, truth in it, justice in it, humanity in it, that is what's propagated by that class, and they're going to continue to do that. See, our challenge, or the challenge of the whites that are not in that group, is to challenge that group.
Right.
That's their challenge. The
Right.
challenge is to challenge that group. When you hear that, when you hear those conversations, when you hear across the dinner table or at Thanksgiving or whatever else, you know that these comments are racist, because racism is taught. It's programmed. It's part. They say it's biological, but even that's an experience over time that's taught. I'm saying it's taught, and you teach that, and you teach these racialized stereotypes from a very young age, and as long as you get it to them by the time they're 8, it's there. And it takes a lot of work to extricate,
Right.
if that's the case. But your experience is this: the battle is for them to fight against the racists among them, because racism was birthed from them in the first place.
Exactly.
And see, our challenge is to have the power to make sure that it doesn't have the power to reap consequences on us.
Exactly.
See, our thing is we're in a struggle, and our political agenda has to be to gain power, to gain control of the police in our community, to gain control of the economics in our community, to gain control of the education in our community, the housing in our community, and the healthcare in our community.
Right.
We have to do that.
Right.
And if we're not doing that, if our policies are not doing that, if you're electing people who are not doing that, then you're not doing anything. Not for our people,
Right.
not for progress,
Right.
and not for the elevation.
Right.
So that's what we have to look at when we say policing in our community. What is the political role of that?
Right, right. And then we look at also when we look at this separation, because I know I'm glad the caller called, because many times people say, well, white officers are shooting white people, and they're not just shooting black people. And then once again, I must reiterate, the struggle we have are similar on one extent, but is totally different on another. It's a black child who's been ripped of his name and his culture and who he is. You won't find a white child who thinks that his people are savages and came out of trees and are monkeys, but you will find black children who actually believe this and hate their color of their skin. And you'll find black children who don't understand an African name and their very own culture. You won't find that in white children. So it's, even though there are troubling signs about how this system treats its own, it's even worse how they treat others and how they demean others and how they have a genocidal behavior toward others. So we're not here to say that, no, just black children are hurt by the system. Everybody is hurt by the system. But at this point in time, we have to start concentrating on that black child after Brown versus Board of Education, because we have taken a nosedive. If you look in the streets of Los Angeles, you'll find that it's our people who make up the majority of the homeless. If you look at the criminal prosecution, you'll find there's our people who are disproportionately are put in the prison system, and that's a problem. So that's what we're saying.
It's a huge problem, and what we really have to examine is now what policies are we going to demand of I don't care who's in the office.
That's right.
Tell you the truth,
No,
but
yeah, exactly.
but what policies are we going to demand in terms of reforming and reshaping the attitudes towards our people in this society, and even among ourselves? What kind of self-policing will we do?
Right.
What type of demands will we ask?
Right.
What kind of standards will we set?
Right.
Again, for ourselves, and uplift the dignity and the pride in our people. We have to really look in the mirror and call upon ourselves to be the example that we want for our future generation. We looked at some things, some depictions, some vulgarity that we're gonna have to simply put an end to, and that's the bottom line. I don't want to hear nothing about that's how I do it. I don't want to hear nothing about that's it's just the way it is in the hood or whatever else. No, it's not like that. That's right. And it didn't used to be that way. It's just a fact that we stopped standing up. It's certain things that we understand, but there's other things that a child never will run an adult. And we've let children run adults. We've letting it run it in our community. We're letting it run it on the planet. We're letting it happen basically in the universe. We're letting the child mindset run the planet.
That's right.
And it's destruction. That's all that comes out of that. And we know this. So it's time for us to take our proper place and play our proper roles. And that has to be done in the spirit of dignity, in the spirit of respect. It is not all encompassing. There are boundaries. There are definitions. There are lines that should not be crossed. This is why we have an atom bomb, a neutron bomb, is because there's certain lines that are not supposed to be crossed. And when you cross them, it becomes a total destructive force. So what are we going to do to right that? What behaviors are we going to demand in our community where no one needs to come in and police them because we've already policed ourselves?
Right. Yeah, I think, what's sad about, about that, I think we have to go back and see where did we make the wrong turn, when we came out of the South and we were yes, ma'am, and no, sir. And then we got to the big cities and you lose that. Now the fact that now we disrespect people older than us, and when you're walking down the street, there's no telling what a young child might do to that adult. And we go back to the fact that they have been conditioned. And we have to learn this as a community. It's not just individuals. A child is not born good or bad. A child is conditioned by what you put in front of it. That's our responsibility. And many times, like you said, there's an individual responsibility and then there's societal responsibility. And in between that is also the parental responsibility. And part of what we know from the culture, the reason why I always say about African culture, I know y'all talk about Africa all the time, because Africa had the playbook, the blueprint on how to socialize children so that when they enter society, they will become productive. And that's why they attacked us. We, a lot of y'all are too young to remember the Roots series, but the very important part of the series is when the slave and the enslaver took a whip and broke the African and said, I'm giving you a new name. And that signified not just a new name, but a new behavior. And this behavior is going to stay with you. This behavior is going to stay with you for a long time. I'm going to give you a new spiritual system. And this spiritual system is going to stay with you a long time. I'm going to give you a new value system. In other words, I'm going to give you something else to like,
power structure,
something else to like and something to dislike.
That's
all of this that I'm giving you is going to ensure that 3 and 4 generations from now, your great grandchild is going to turn and kill this other black.
But listen to the terminology, because as we say giving, they claim that this is such as a gift, when actually it's an imposition and a force. But that's what they do. They take these terms and say the master gave you a name. You remember that they said that over and over again. He gave you a name. He gave you again. That's the power again. You name animals. You name pets, and then you name slaves. So as we talk about and we move into the series, when they ask us why do we take on African names, or why do we want to assert that culture, it's only because you are misinformed and miseducated about Africa that you would even bring that up.
Exactly.
When you come up with that you didn't leave nothing in Africa, and as Malcolm used to say, yes you did, you left your mind in Africa, you left your soul and your culture in Africa, thinking that you have something better and evolved here, when in actuality and in truth we have power in Africa. It's just waiting there dormant, and we still think. I still think we should all unite together. I agree, but you got to unite on what? We have to unite on something common,
right? And we normalize the fact that we aren't our whole self. If we're going to unite, let me unite as who I was. Don't make me unite under your terms. In other words, why do I have to unite as a John or a Tom? Why can't I unite as Omawali?
Right.
Why can I bring my culture to the table of human experience
to be accepted?
This is who I am. Why to be accepted? Do we have to be bland? And
see,
I just want to say that the biggest issue we have, we overlook. There's a way to be colorblind racist. In other words,
absolutely.
In other words, oh no. See, in this room we don't see race. Well,
that's a problem.
In this room, we practice this and we value this, and all that you practice and you value belongs to just one group of people.
So-called westernized or white society. What you say westernized, which is what you mean by that. Yeah. But here's the whole thing: that standard is presented as superior.
Yeah.
And that standard in terms of beauty, in terms of
Yeah.
speech,
Intelligence.
intelligence, all of these
Yeah.
intelligence
Yeah.
tests are nothing more
And now
than
we-
linguistics.
And now
So-
we have children who are bleaching their skin. So see, we have some hurt in our community that we have to address. We have people who bleach their skin, who cut their nose. It's interesting how we can point the finger at Michael Jackson and say, how could he do that to himself? But yet we turn around and say, but we're all the same though. No, we're not. It's a group of us who are denying who we are as a people. You have another question?
No, that's just less than a clap. She's saying, yes, and I agree. Muslim petition to have their own police forces, for example. Now there appears to be differences in policing based on race. People will treat their own kind with more empathy because they have a kinship. And that's just naturally, and that's not racist. And people got to understand that you should be able to transfer that humanity to other people as well. However, in a society that has overwhelmingly been clouded, overwhelmingly been saturated with a European standard, there takes some repair.
And white supremacy.
Yes.
Because we have factual evidence to show that white supremacists have actually infiltrated the police department.
Oh, absolutely.
We now know that they even having tattoos that designate them as a white supremacist organization. So when you look at us and then in our response to being brutalized, you say, well, you are now being racist. That's a double attack on our intelligence, because first you hurt us, and then in our response to protect ourselves from that hurt, you then hurt us again by claiming that we are the immoral ones.
Right. It's just
So
like
we have to
calling
be-
a person that defends themselves from being raped a violent criminal for beating off their attacker.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we look at it and we start saying that, yeah, we want to be part of the human family, but we want to be part of the human family as a whole. We don't want to have to chop off our Africanness to come involved in the human
homogenize
family.
ourselves
Homogenize
to be
ourselves.
tolerated or
Exactly.
palatable. And see,
Yeah.
that seems to be an issue as well. Now, if you're saying you're going to respect me, you're going to respect me as an African.
Right.
You're not going to respect me as a quote unquote black version of a European, because
Right.
I'm never going to be that.
And it's
And-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
But ironically, we have been the one to
Self-imposed that.
self-impose it. Ironically, we have been the one who've been willing to give all that up. If you go to any major city, you're going to see a Chinatown, a Koreatown, Armenian town like we have it. But you don't find an African town.
But-
we have been willing to say, "Oh no, we won't see color," and we see what it's done to us.
Well, yeah.
We see how it's harmed us. So we should be an example of like, no. Let's all come to the table of who we are. I like to go to Koreatown and eat. I like to go to Chinatown and see the
Sure
different
do.
cultures. But I think you should like to come to Africa town and see
eat.
what Africa looks like, what it looks like, what
You
it
do
smells
it.
like, and what it eats.
You do it on the sly anyway. So that's
Yeah.
my whole point.
So,
And
yeah.
see, for us, our thing is that we've bought in. It goes back to that stereotype again. We bought in to the stereotype that has been programmed, browbeaten, and perpetuated over centuries. Of the so-called black savage. You know, I get into that when I do my presentation. We have certain categories that are instilled. There's the coon, there's the savage, there's the brute, there's the promiscuous, and then the clown, basically. You know, the Sambo. Those are the terms, and those are the categories, and you'll see that manifested throughout movies, throughout media plays, throughout literature. You'll see it throughout stories and education, and these stereotypes are reinforced by society and rewarded by society. When people ask how do athletes make all of that money, millions and millions for entertaining, it still goes into a category. It's the power or the brute. It goes into the category. The entertainer that sings and dances and stuff, it goes into a category. Supporting by stereotypes, so they'll pay you for that. This society will reward you for that.
And when
But
you step outside that,
you step outside
you
of you
penalized it.
become
Just
an
dribble.
intellectual. You become a business person that can donate and take care of scholarships
It's
for an
possible.
entire class at Morehouse, and then they turn around and sick the IRS on you. See, this is what I'm saying. These sort of things, this sort of open thinking, you start
Right.
criticizing the policies of the United States government, and then they attack. So there's only certain categories.
and like LeBron put together a great team, has done great, exceptionally well business wise, and you have someone like a Phil Jackson that refers to them as a posse, as though there's some type of game. Because when you step outside that well worn stereotype, then all of a sudden it's a problem. How they interact with you, it's a problem. So these things we have to be honest about. This is the one thing that we have not been. It's a hard conversation to have without people having hurt feelings, and it's ironic that the people who hurt us the most are the ones that have the hurt feelings, and you should not. We have issues that we must resolve, and you tell us that all the time as Black Republicans. This is my issue with Black Republicans. So Black Republicans always say, well, we have issues. We have to be having this personality. I mean, we have to be we have to take an account of what we've done. When we do that, then you go, oh, there y'all go with all that black stuff. Well, then you can't run to Republican Party and claim to be independent. If you're going to be independent, you're going to have an independent mindset, and that's what we're having, an independent mindset.
Well, see, I have a problem with Black Democrats too. Black Republicans, Black Democrats, because they mostly Black uninformed.
That's right.
Because you don't read, you don't get into the issues that underline our community. You don't want to face the fact. You're always trying to make your blackness invisible.
That's right.
And then if you have to make yourself invisible, then who are you? You're not even in existence. So to me, that's the issue with this political game. And then you turn around and say that the victims of police violence, the victims of police brutality, the victims of police killings are somehow deserving of this because they somehow have engaged in some activity that would warrant it. And any other person engaged in the same activity might get a night in jail or if at best. But our people end up 6 feet under instead of a 6 foot cell.
Well, it's like George Floyd, the man who had his knee in George Floyd back. Now it's come out that he's been investigated for tax evasion. I bet. So George Floyd stole $20. I bet through his tax evasion. So they say. But I bet it through his tax evasion is much more than $20. And so therefore, the person who commits the crime kills you.
Pull
for being
Trump's
criminal.
Tax records.
Man,
pull his tax.
Exactly.
See, you
while
tolerate
Robert
it.
Smith is being investigated for the president of the United States gets away with it. So we have this one and over and over and over again. So these are some hard questions that if we're going to solve this situation, we're going to.
So who's going to police the police is the question. If the society doesn't bring consequences on police, what is it telling us? The Panthers had that question, 50-something years ago, right? 54 years ago, the Panthers had the same question. Who's going to police the police? Because they're violating. And then they changed gun laws. They changed all kind of things to offset what the Panthers were promoting. And now, if you look at that, you have a breakfast program in U.S. schools because of them. So anybody that says it was strictly, gunpowder and threats and all of that, they served people's needs. And that's the formula for success. So the question is, who are going to serve us? Who is going to serve our needs? Are the police serving our needs, or are they serving someone else's needs? And if this answer is they're serving someone else's needs, they don't need to be around us. Period. We're capable of taking care. I guarantee you we won't be killing our own people. I guarantee you the crime rate would go down if we were policing our own people. I guarantee you will see a reduction in recidivism. I guarantee you will see reform that the prison system is not geared to produce because they profit from it. They profit from our criminalization. Just like the politicians profit from political and the terms that they come out with. Now, the new term, domestic terrorism. That's an invite for the Homeland Security. I guarantee you. All rights suspended. No due process. And they can hold you under the threat of being a terrorist, so-called domestic terrorist, not under international scrutiny either. So you got to look at these terms that they're starting to label our people and the politicizing of policing. They're trying to take it. They're going to take it away. You're going to see privatization of policing. But who is that? The Blackwater domestic? You have to start thinking. We have to start looking at things and stop reacting to everything and start analyzing what these people are doing and our answer to that. We have to reject oppression, and we're not doing that.
And I think, like you say, look at the bigger picture and how the system is able to pit us against one another. Because we as a people also have to start looking at this immigration issue. Well, I know a lot of blacks were saying, well, Trump is going to keep the illegals from coming over, and that's how we've lost our jobs. If you think a businessman who calls himself Republican, and Republicans ran by so-called business people, that they're going to run out cheap labor, then that's crazy. The only reason why they did that was to buy the votes of the racist whites. And so don't let them run the same game on us, and we become subject to being pawns in this game of pitting one group against the other. When we talk about this immigration issue and them locking people up, people are getting paid when they lock those people up. They are making money. It's all up. It all comes down to the fact that the so-called 1% saying, how do we play with this populations and we make money while we compete with the international community. So the last thing we're going to say is that it comes down to the power issue. Who has the power? Because we want to be able to have authority over our lives, our education, our food source, our health, and our well-being. And we do not at this point. This is what we always say, and I know it's rough to hear it. I know it makes you feel like, I hate to hear that, but we do not have the power right now. We must organize ourselves to check the power interest. This is why to this day, a young girl was asleep and someone knocked on her door and didn't even knock on the door, broke through the door and killed her. And they have not seen time in jail because it comes down to the fact that we do not have the power to go get them and make them pay for the innocent killing of a young black girl. That's all I have to say.
That's it. And so as we close, again, we have to ask ourselves those questions. If it's power, do we have it? If the answer is no, how do you get it? If your answer is to integrate into it, nowhere in history can you show me where that has been a access to power. Nowhere in history can you prove that has been a strategy that has given us protection. So when we look at our final analysis of policing and what police interests are, it is to maintain the power structure that exists. And if that power structure that exists oppresses us, which it does, check that box. If the original reason for us to come into the country or be brought to this country was for people to exploit our labor and make profits off of us, does that still exist? Check that box. Yes, it does. So policing, again, enables that system to continue. And anyone that promotes that has to be an enemy to the masses of black people. There are individuals who will get promoted, who will promote, take endorsements from police unions and all of these things to endorse the fear, the imaginary fear that black people are out to get you. If we were out to get you, you would already be got. We've been here for 400 plus years. So that's an irrational fear. We just want the opportunity to produce and do for self and protect ourselves and, yes, police ourselves. And that should be our demand, and that should be on the agenda. So until next week, we want you to think about that, and we'll come with the next topic. And as we leave, we just... You got it. No, that was good. That was it. I heard the music. Huh?
We are, right?